there are nutrients, and there's lots of ways to make homemade fertilizers. Stuff you have, coffee grounds, of course. I mean, almost everything. One of the reasons I recommend the system with the rabbit pellets, you can put them directly onto the soil, but the best thing to do is to make that into a worm compost bin. Dr. Elaine Ingram, who is the diva of soil microbiology. I mean, this woman is amazing, and it's unbelievable. I think soil microbiology is the next cutting edge for regenerative agriculture, because there's so much we just don't know about the microbes and what they can do. But hands down, worm compost and worm compost tea. Compost tea is another technique of something you can make very simply, and I'll get into that in a second. But worm compost, hands down, is the finest compost, biologically active and potent, that you can do for your garden.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Marjory Wildcraft from the Grow Network with me. The ultimate resource for modern, sustainable living. You know, so many things are coming into play right now. We are entering into the spring planting season. You know, we see the destruction of complex systems in terms of food deliveries and inflation running rampant. You know, one thing we'll need to do first is grow our own food. And so many ways to think about sprouting seeds, saving foods, and just the bevy of homesteading. And so many other questions here. I have an entire page of notes that I wanted to ask that, myself, because we have a small farm out here and we're trying to get more self-sufficient, we all need to do this. And there's just so much interest in it. I didn't know that the number one trending currently topic is self-sustainability moving in, and I can understand why, especially moving into spring planting season. But the trending, if you start to look around the topics that are trending, in addition to Ohio, but just before that, it was all about caretaking, raising chickens, growing vegetables, getting a garden up. This whole thing was the whole trending movement, like homesteading, which gives me a really boost of faith that, wow, really something is changing. A lot of people are really becoming aware. So Marjory, I appreciate you joining me. And I know we're going to have a lot to talk about. So floor is yours.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, David. I'm just want everybody to know I'm following your channel all the time. I just love the information you present and how you present it and how well researched it is. No, that's why I love my own community is with the Grow Network. We have a big forums where people are always interacting and reporting on different things. And I trust those people, I trust my community there. So,
yeah, now Marjorie, could I say something? Yeah, that's the Homestead Forum. Am I correct talking about that?
It's at the Grow Network, thegrownetwork.com forums. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was looking through there earlier, and one problem we have is moles out here. And I found somebody that had, because, you can get the traps, and we have dogs out here, and we didn't want to put it in that granular slow release to try to kill the grubs, to try to stop the moles.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying not to put any chemical on my property at all.
Yeah.
At all. If I can truly avoid it, there's none going down. But garlic in the molehills, and I didn't realize that was one, and then elder twigs, and we grow elderberry out here. So I was looking at that and go, whoa, we have both of those. So putting garlic cloves down in their little tunnels, if you will, because you're always going to find raised areas, walk over it. See, our dogs keep tearing that up. They're chasing the moles around, but yeah, you can see all these lines. It looks like, a bunch of veins going through the yard because the dogs keep digging them, and they'll find them eventually, but they keep chasing them down. Garlic in the molehill or along the mole trails in the molehills, and then elder twigs. These are the kind of things I was finding. For me, also the free tincture making series. And now a quick word from Patriot Gold Group. Have you kept up with the big headlines so far this year? Bank of America says that gold should be a mainstay investment for the next 3 years. Big banks and billionaires agree on two things. We're heading toward a recession, and investors need to buy gold. The Patriot Gold Group is introducing the 2023 Recession Protection No Fee for Life IRA. Mention ADAPT 2030. You're going to get the best in-class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your 401k or IRA can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. That's 888-546-7020 to reach out for your free investor guide today. Keep in mind, Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top rated IRA gold dealer 6 years in a row. That's 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. Because I do some distilling with a friend of mine who, this is interesting, he's got a distillery and they grow hundreds of acres of a specific type of heirloom corn that's not really available. It's a contract grow just for their distillery. But he's teaching me the finesses of being able to distill to be able to then do what I do is tinctures. But I save like the 4 shots to do for rubbing alcohols for my hands or solvents for cleaning, you know, just into stuff. And then the medicinal trees, and then the starting tree, the starting of seeds. And this is what I found this morning, just looking through, you know, of things of interest for me that I was so like, wow, super excited about, especially with the moles. That was like the most gold nugget for me as a personal, because we've been just trying to deal with these moles and grubs the whole time, eating everything. And I'm so happy and thankful that you had that forum out there for everybody.
Well, that website's, I mean, I've been building that for 14 years now. I mean, really, we've attracted a lot of the people who have been living this lifestyle for a long time, not because there's a crisis, but because they live this lifestyle. And I'm really just so honored to be surrounded by those people. And yeah, and it's real stuff, you know, it's what people have done and do, and they're genuine solutions. So that is the point. We've built the Grow Network for just this crisis that we're in right now. And we are in a crisis. Oh my God. Your work, there's quite a few other pieces of work that are coming out that's pointing to just absolute chaos this summer related to the food. And it may actually even come in earlier that to where it astonishes me how many people are still like, shh.
Yeah, wait until it becomes the panic buy phase, and then you'll really understand. Pre-stationing your assets, your seed supplies, etc., will be so integral, especially getting garden tools.
Yeah, I'm thinking that'll be about May. I'm thinking that'll
really
be
May. Okay.
Yeah.
That's only a month and a half from now.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. I've been a prepper so long. I've got pretty much everything. And now I'm getting like backups for the backups for the backups.
Yeah. What if you had to run though? What if you were in Palestine and you were like that and you know, you had everything and then suddenly you can't even let your cattle or your chickens graze on the grass anymore because it's totally toxic. Like then what? Then you literally cool.
That's when you have, you know, cryptocurrency or offshore stuff where you can move. And yeah, it would be a sacrifice because I've got a lot of great resources, you know, homesteading tools, equipment, supplies. That would be a huge loss. But yeah, I definitely have a backup in terms of, you know, I mean, crypto is the best thing, you know, you can cross borders, you can go anywhere, you'll be able to rebuild, you know.
Yeah, that might be a mind frame thing too, is always never say that I'm never going to leave. That might be actually something detrimental. If you're in that mind frame of I'm never going to leave, well, then you've already positioned yourself to not have anything ready to even do that like assessment of what you might want to take with you as the most important things, because you're never going to leave. Well, what happened there? I mean, the most diehard I'm never going to leave is probably going to leave after that Ohio train derailment, especially if they were in that town within 4 or 5 miles and they couldn't breathe. I mean, sheesh. You're going to have a backup to the backup to the backup, like the Amish. So if I could speak for a second here, Marjory, the Amish, you know, is many people's backup plan for food, or the third, you know, the tertiary plan. If the supermarkets don't go down, they'll go to like secondary supermarkets, Aldi, or they'll go to the farmers markets in town. Okay. But if that fails, then you can actually go to the farm direct out, or the people are going to run to the Amish farms and sort of thing. So where are the Amish going to go? Are they going to start buying supermarket food that's going to make them sick because they're not used to the preservatives and all that stuff that we've, I think, gradually become used to over however old we are, you know, through our food system? It doesn't shock us. But imagine Amish growing their own clean food for multi-generations, suddenly having to go buy 100% supermarket food because they can't produce any food on their own land. Oh, my. That'd be a case study in medical you know, allergies from food right there for you.
Toxicology. Yeah. So, I mean, have we ascertained that that the soils absolutely, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where the biggest concentration, Indiana, where the biggest concentration of the Amish are, how much has actually been dumped on that land, and is that absolutely now basically like salting the earth in those states? Is that
unknown at the moment? But I'm saying one thing: they might have tested the air and water right now because there's no rains, but the next major rain front that comes in and starts to wash all that off of everything. Yeah, could it be just a repeating process of every time it rains, it gets dumped, and you get these mini plumes that go down after every single rainfall? Like Cincinnati cut off their water intake out of an abundance of caution, even though they said there was nothing measurable. Sure it was.
yeah, yeah. That rain thing is a real deal. Just one year I had this beautiful, beautiful tomato garden, and I'd gotten this hay that the farmer swore to me was, nothing had ever been applied to it. And actually he had put picloram on it. That's that weed suppressant.
Okay.
And had this hay, and it looks so good. It looks so nice. It's a nice mulch, and the garden looks amazing. Tomatoes were doing great. First rain, all those tomatoes started to get those curly leaves, sickly look that happens when you get that. And it was just like, wow, the rain came down through the mulch that was on the ground and got into the soil. And yeah, so you're right. The rains will tell. That's another thing I'm trying to figure out. How can we, well, I guess testing it'll be simple enough. We recently in my community here, we've been looking for where can we get large sources of compost, because people are going to need to be growing here, and they'll be looking for that. And it turns out in the community over, there's a big composting operation. And I went and got a bunch of their compost and had it tested for all kinds of stuff to make sure it's good.
No, we went to Monterey Mushroom, and they would sell it. So I got 60 cubic yards of mushroom compost delivered. And again, Monterey Mushroom's pretty clean, because they're mushrooms are all there. They try to keep it really clean. The toxicity of a mushroom uptake, so it's ultra clean compost comparatively, because it has to be, because eating a mushroom, that's a detoxifier anyway,
Well, that was, I'm sorry, I got back on track again. So the way we tested it is, one, we sent in soil samples to, we like Ward Laboratories. Mm-hmm. They do a good job. They're not expensive. They really cater to organic farmers. And then the other thing is we had 2 or 3 of us take some of the soil and grow both tomatoes and legumes in it, because those plants tend to be very, very susceptible if there's any kind of pesticides or toxins in it. And the plants grew beautifully. And we said, okay, well, that's your most fundamental test for us of how can we identify this simply and easily as homesteaders? Because again, now and everything in the future, more has to be, what can you actually identify yourself? What do you know to be true in this reality, not with the screen and not with the goggles, because none of that's real, or it's getting less and less real all the time.
Yeah, and if I could add on one thing, Danny from Deep South Homestead, I don't know if you're familiar, but he built out a nice greenhouse, but the earth he brought in there, again, he got it from a local farming community, had the gray zone in it. So even when he wanted to plant in his greenhouse, you're completely controlling the environment. So everything you put in there should be completely free of chemical, and it should be 100% of what you wanted in there. It's your baby, it's your greenhouse, you're 100% input. But he found that the gray zone was in the soil, so he had to scrape everything out of his beds and start over again, because the actual contaminant was then inside, or the herbicide was actually inside the soil beds that he installed himself. So these are things, and he's way up there in terms of understanding the farming. But again, it was the word of the person who sold them the soil that said absolutely no, there's nothing, and then it sure was. So how do we test ourselves? I'm asking the question, like, how simple are these tests to acquire? I have a regular pH kit that we do with the soil here to see where we want to plant different things. Okay, that's pretty easy. You shake the thing and it turns color. But like, where else can we find some of these testing kits that would be really valuable for some of us out in the homestead areas here?
Well, again, for a lot of those pesticides and stuff, just grow, a tray of legumes and tomatoes. And it doesn't take that long. They sprout pretty quickly, and you'll see after a couple of sets of the true leaves come on, you'll see it. But I don't know. We need to figure that out for when there's these PCBs or dioxins in the soil. What happens to plants when you grow them. Maybe I can find somebody in my community that has soil there that's contaminated and they can grow some things and show us. And, like most of the solutions we have, I kind of have a love-hate relationship, but almost all the municipalities in the US and a lot of other places compost their solid wastes. And now I live here in Puerto Rico. They used to dump the solid waste directly into the ocean. I don't think that's a good idea. Then they said, okay, well, let's incinerate it. I don't think that's a good idea. And so now they compost it, which is slightly better. But the thing is, and this is happening all over the US everywhere, and the EPA is fully endorsing it and saying it's safe, is they take this composted, it's biosludge, basically. And if you think about in a city with a couple of million people, what goes into the sewer system there, so hospitals and all their stuff, light industry and all their chemicals, and then just all the random stuff that people throw down the drain, cleaning supplies, then of course all your medications
dailies
that are coming out. Yeah. Oh God. Okay. Yeah. So they compost that, and it has God knows what in it, heavy metals for absolutely certain. And then they bag it up and they sell it as compost. They often sell it by the truckload to farmers to apply to fields to grow crops, but they also bag it up and sell it to homeowners. And it's often under very, very organic sounding names. And the EPA has allowed them to sell it as an organic fertilizer. So on the bag, it'll say, or organic, they've allowed them to call it compost. I'm sorry, not organic fertilizer. They've allowed it to call it compost when it's actually just biosludge, which I guess technically has been composted. In Austin, they call it dillo dirt. I think up in the Seattle area, or Oregon, it's called organicite or organite. I mean, it has these kind of homey organic names, and you're just absolutely creating toxins in your soil, heavy metals, which a lot of our vegetables and a lot of our produce, a lot of our annuals uptake. I mean, people eat cilantro to clean heavy metals out of their system. you grow the cilantro in soil with heavy metals, you're going to have heavy metal cilantro. So be very wary of any kind of soils that you're getting especially from the big box, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, and that kind of places. So I think the best thing that we have for now for general pesticides is what we did locally, and that is send it to a laboratory. I do recommend Ward Labs. Tell them Marjory sent you.
How do you spell that?
WARD. And they're super cool. I mean, you send in the sample, you fill out a form, and I'm like, hey, when do I pay you guys? They go, after we tested it, we'll send you an invoice, and they'll send you the test results and let you know. And then they can also give you advice on things. I actually should call them about remediation, what they can recommend. And then the other thing is, grow a couple of trays of seedlings. As I said, legumes are especially sensitive to herbicides, and then tomatoes also. So you'll notice it right away that those plants aren't growing correctly. So that's the first gross test. If you have something like hay or horse manure that you just picked up from, oh my God, one time I had this wonderful, lovely whole backyard of a bed of a pickup truck full of horse manure. And what I did is I took like a couple of shovelfuls of the horse manure, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, filled it up with water, and just stirred it regularly to keep it a little bit aerated over, like a 24-hour period to just mix up. And then I had grown some seedlings, some legume seedlings, and then I applied that water from the manure to the seedlings, and then depending, the seedlings would either not come out well or they'd be healthy, and that would give you an indication. It was same with hay. You can put a bucket full of the hay there, add water to it, stir it around, make sure you're getting off whatever chemicals that it may or may not have, and then apply that water to your plants. So it's how you handle materials that, not like you can't grow directly in hay, right? So that's how you can handle materials for these rough homegrown tests. I guess you're right. I should add pH in there. Like, wow, if the pH is really way off, um, what can you do? Yeah, the bottom line is you are going to have to grow your own food if you want to make it through, honestly, through this next decade. It's just essential. It actually has been for the past couple of decades. People don't realize it, but the commercial food supply is completely and utterly devoid of nutrients and completely loaded with toxins.
Back to the sludge there. There's a book I was privileged to read. It was from the 1950s. I think it was like 1953 it was published. And the title is Sludge is Good for You.
Oh
It was all
no.
about how the government was doing the exact same thing. They were composting it, incinerating it, and taking the ash and turning it into fertilizer, giving it to the farmers so they could spread out on the fields. Things that were basically waste byproducts, the way that they were re-referenced and reframed to be good for you. And you got to realize this is in the 1950s this book was written, but they went through a bevy of each one on how it was reframed and put into a product, or, resold to the public as being something good, even though it was a waste product, even at that time, which would still have cost money to dispose of. But the way that the PR spin was on this waste, on how it was, again, put out into the public arena as something good and something beneficial for mankind. So you got to think about, that would be almost 70 years ago. And, how far have we come since that point?
And then the whole food supply has kind of been like this big Jenga game, right? They pull out this little thing here and they pull out this little thing here, pull out that little thing here. And nobody really notices unless you're really paying attention. But I think we're at that point where, we're pulling out enough blocks that the whole thing is going to come down, and it's going to become obvious to everybody that it's a problem. At some point, what is it, Roy Rogers, that says you go bankrupt slowly until it happens all at once? Kind of an event.
That's with everything, though.
Yeah.
So then what would you, okay, then everybody's backs against the wall and we're all in the same predicament, and the entire world, or at least the United States, will know that you got to grow your own. So, thinking about fertilizers, compost, and things, like, how are people going to get fertilizer? For me, if I need hummus or something, I got 23 acres here, and half of it's forested. I'll just go up there and scrape off a bunch of, I'll scrape off the top inch or two of leaves and then just go and dig a bunch of stuff that's already composted for me in the forest naturally. And I get my own, hummus that comes out of there, leaf hummus, soil compost hummus straight from the forest. For me, it's easier to do than probably another person that is in a neighborhood that has no access except Home Depot to get fertilizers, or, Lowe's or some garden center. Well, that'll be sold out almost immediately. So, walk me through that. We're thinking about fertilizer.
First of all, the early adopters have the advantage, and that's why people watching your channel, paying attention, are going to be ahead of the game, because you already know that you're already starting to prepare. And definitely, there are some I'm really, really proud of the Grow Network community, because the most hands down popular ebook blog post that we have ever had is 50 homemade fertilizers. And NPK, the big three, right? Every plant needs them. These are like the macronutrients. It's like carbohydrates, protein, and fats for plants is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You produce enough nitrogen, plant available, highly soluble nitrogen in your own urine. And for a long time, I just had a 5-gallon bucket with a lid out the back door, and you just pee in that, put the lid on it so you don't have a smell issue, dilute it 10-to-1 and apply it to the roots, and you've got a lot of nitrogen right there, right? If you've got chickens, the bird droppings, let's see, it's phosphorus, that white stuff that's on it. You've seen chicken poop, right? It's kind of got a white, I think that's phosphorus. There are nutrients, and there's lots of ways to make homemade fertilizers. Stuff you have, coffee grounds, of course. Almost everything. One of the reasons I recommend the system with the rabbit pellets, you can put them directly onto the soil, but the best thing to do is to make that into a worm compost bin. Dr. Elaine Ingram, who is the diva of soil microbiology. This woman is amazing, and it's unbelievable. I think soil microbiology is the next cutting edge for regenerative agriculture, because there's so much we just don't know about the microbes and what they can do. But hands down, worm compost and worm compost tea. Compost tea is another technique of something you can make very simply, and I'll get into that in a second. But worm compost, hands down, is the finest compost, biologically active and potent, that you can do for your garden. And of course, all the other growing things that you need for your other livestock. By the way, compost tea, in case people don't realize it, is a way of taking, you take a couple of handfuls of really active soil, maybe some of your worm compost, that's some things that are really biologically active, and you brew a tea. You're not using heat, so it's not like tea that we drink. It's called tea because you brew it with water and you aerate it, and you may add a little bit of food in there, like a little tiny amounts of sugars or things, and it causes the microorganisms that were in the small sample to multiply, thousands fold, 10,000 fold or whatever into the liquid. And then you apply that to your soil and you start to begin to add more microorganisms to your soil. It's another very simple homemade fertilizer that adds soil microbiology to soil that may very likely be devoid of it. So really creating your own fertilizers, it is totally possible to do. So, and that of course is an issue because, as you know, the fertilizer supplies, and especially as the commercial ones dependent on natural gas, there's that whole supply chain system completely breaking down. But yeah, your own homemade fertilizer. The other really cool thing about your own homemade compost is far superior to any other commercially made compost. And here's why. Commercially made compost is made out of usually 3, 4, maybe 5 ingredients, right? A friend of mine had a compost making company. He said the Mars Candy Company came to him and said, "Hey, we got this whole semi truck full of candy bars that are bad, and could you compost them?" And he said, "Sure." Got the piles so hot they were burning up all the time. But anyway, it's funny. But your own compost is going to be made out of 50 things or 100 things. Either that banana peel or the coffee grinds, and then the filter that the coffee grinds were in, or the leftover end from the broccoli stem. With all that diversity of different food sources, you're going to have an incredible diversity of microorganisms, and it's the diversity of microorganisms in your soil that really helps increase your plant vitality. People think that the roots go in the soil and somehow the roots just get minerals out of the soil, and they never have thought that part through. But what it is, the roots of the plants have a very symbiotic relationship with the soil microbiology, so the different bacteria and fungi that are in the soil. And what plants can do is create carbohydrates, which are sugars, right, from carbon dioxide and sunlight and water, and they excrete it through their roots to feed the microbiology. And what the microorganisms do is break down minerals in rocks and soil and things around it and provide the minerals to the plant. So there's a whole relationship going on underground. And very much like your own gut bacteria, when you have a huge diversity of gut bacteria and you're very healthy, you can eat a lot of foods and you're getting a lot more nutrition out of it. The same thing is true for your soil. So increasing your soil microbiology is pretty simple with compost teas.
Now, can I add in there too? The thing to think about, is the amount of time that it takes to go from hard clay soils where you can't really grow anything into more of a viable bed of something that can, be planted in right away. What are some ways that you could speed up? Because you've had time, we've had time, others have had time to actually build this up year over year. What are some good words of advice for people who are I never did it before and I want instant results, and you guys are talking years to compost stuff and build soils, and yet how's that going to work in this modern world?
Hopefully you have financial resources. Oh, and we do have that webinar where I show people how you can get up to speed growing half of your own food very, very quickly. I highly recommend raised beds. And really, you only need about 100 square feet per person. So that would be 2 50 square foot beds. They're 5 feet wide by 10, 12 feet long, 2 of them, and 2 cinder blocks high. And fill that up with the highest quality soil that you can buy. And again, the early adopters have the advantage because high quality soil is going to be gone. It's going to disappear just like all the food on the shelves in the grocery store. So yes, go do it right now. High quality soil is absolute. Just like right now, I would recommend go buy some laying hens immediately. If people are already going, hey, a backyard flock of chickens, you've seen that funny meme where there's this laying hen and they're saying she has a higher net worth than Elon Musk. It's
Yeah.
the price of eggs, right? So
Yeah, now the
yes.
webinar, I'll put the link for that in the description box below. Well worth your watch. And that was one of the reasons I was bringing up, how to do things a little bit faster and get things in motion with a huge learning curve out of the way. Like learn from somebody who already invented the wheel 50 times and then, move that direction and just follow the experts that have already wired this down. Because if you're going to muddle through it, speaking of chickens, and we're on our fourth change for our chicken run / chicken coop / chicken playground /
Yeah.
It's a never-ending thing. Now, if I could have come at it right now with what I learned over the last year and a half of having chickens and trying to get their living habitat better, I could, speed up that and be like, avoid that, don't do this, try this, expand this, do this, put the cage up, the 12 poles, put the net on, and you're good. But, it took me a long time, even watching videos and making mistakes to figure out we were doing sort of incorrectly here. So the webinar is going to save you an enormous amount of time of just going straight into the best refined science of how it's being done to get the highest result in a short amount of time.
Almost all of the homesteads, there are a few exceptions, but like we've built an academy where we have all these courses on like, here's how you do chickens step by step. Make sure you have this in place so you don't get your chickens stolen by raccoons. Here's how you do this to avoid snakes. Here's the breeds you need for the region you're in. Everything we have step by step. And I have spent time with all of the presenters in the academy that we've created and been on their homesteads. And I have to tell you, that's the funnest part of my job because you eat extraordinarily well. You want to visit these homesteaders' farms and they have amazingly delicious food. But yeah, you're right. It's just totally curated information that I've always known there would be some. I got some guidance about 20 years ago that said there's going to be a time when this information is absolutely vital. And for whatever reason, the universe told me I needed to work on it. I was not happy about that. But so I have really been trying to dial that in of step by step. How do you take somebody who knows nothing and get them producing very, very quickly? And the webinar condenses about 20 years of looking at exactly that problem. And we can get you producing about half of your own food very, very, very quickly. And half is huge. Half is a lot.